Before we get going with this week's episode, a word from our friends at Adelphi Racing Club. Adelphi is a racing club of like-minded people who enjoy horse racing and the camaraderie of being a part of something bigger than themselves. It is a true community. Adelphi's founding partners have all owned horses in other partnerships and syndicates as well as on their own, and the overarching goal with Adelphi is to blend the benefits of solo ownership without the administrative hassle with the thrill of the partnership experience. Adelphi offers an interactive ownership experience with real-time access to other partners, trainers, bloodstock advisors, and other members of the team. Adelphi partners receive frequent multimedia content on their horses, including videos, photos, and partner-only podcast content provided by the In the Money Media team, as well as premium on-track and off-track hospitality experiences. Adelphi has an exciting class of yearling prospects, which are available now, including just a couple of these to consider. Salivo, horse named after the popular Saratoga restaurant. It's a street sense filly who is bred to be fast and early and has some major European influence in her pedigree. She'll be headed to Ray Handel's barn in the spring. And a colt that is still TBD as far as his name is concerned. He's by Tappert, who looks and is bred to be a two-turn horse. His dad won the Belmont Stakes. And his dam is a speedy stakes performer out of a leading broodmare sire, Distorted Humor. The second dam was also a stakes winner out of Arch. Further building upon the two-turn credentials, this colt is going to be headed to Christophe Clement's barn in the spring. Join the club. Many ways to find this, more information about Adelphi Racing Club. Let's start off with the website, adelphiracing.com. If you want more information, you can email Matt at adelphiracing.com. And on social media, Instagram, start off with at Adelphi_racing, and on Twitter, at Adelphi Club. That is Adelphi Racing Club. Be sure to check them out. Now, on to this week's episode of the pod. What's happening? Welcome into the Matt Bernier Show, part of the In the Money Media Network. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Today is Monday, November the 15th, 2021. This is episode 91 of the podcast. However you listen, thank you for doing so. So many ways to find this thing, as many of you already know. But if you listen just to the audio, you've got Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, InTheMoneyPodcast.com, just to name a few. If you're someone who likes to watch along over on YouTube, search bar Matt Bernier Show. Get this episode along with the 90 prior. Now, this week's show, I was going through, last week was the bit of the Breeders' Cup hangover, and now we're in a bit of a, not a lull, but a quieter time until, let's say, the Cigar Mile, or as we get closer to opening day at Gulfstream. I know Del Mar's going on. Bob Hope was run over the weekend. You've got some good racing still going on, don't get me wrong. But I think for many of us, it's an opportunity to take a deep breath and just say, all right, well, now we can take a week or maybe two, or some folks maybe just wait right till Gulfstream. Kind of hit the reset button and get your mind fresh, get your body fresh, ready to go. So I'm thinking, what the hell am I going to talk about here? And it just got me thinking a little bit, not that we want to continue on sort of the same path that we have for the past few weeks and months, really, leading into the Breeders' Cup, but it did make me think. Last week I spoke about Knicks Go, and how I thought maybe he was one of the more underappreciated or underrated horses over the past 5 or 10 years. And it got me thinking a little bit of, I had gone through when we were talking about the track profile at Del Mar and how certain horses won certain races. Didn't do it for all the races, but one that we did touch on was the Breeders' Cup Classic, and how horses who won the Classic went about doing it. So then I started kind of putting that together with Knicks Go, thinking about the past 10, maybe 11 Breeders' Cup Classics, thinking, well, where does he stack up compared to those runners and how they went about doing their business? Now, this isn't going to be everybody's cup of tea, but I wanted to have some fun, and I found this fun. Hopefully some of you will, and some of you are going to roll your eyes and say this is the stupidest waste of time ever. But guess what? If you don't like it, don't listen to it. But I went through and put together what I think would be, let's call it a simulation without it being too scientific, a little bit more feel, but using some data to back up the stances. A bit of a simulation. If the past 11 Breeders' Cup Classic winners ran against one another, and I'll rattle them off to you. Knicks Go, Authentic, Vino Rosso, Accelerate, Gunrunner, Arrogate, American Pharoah, Bayern, Mucho Macho Man, Fort Larned, and Drosselmeyer. If the past 11 Breeders' Cup Classic winners lined up at 1.25 miles, let's say Churchill Downs, how would the race play out? Who would go? Who would sit? Who's fast enough to win? Who's not fast enough to win? And ultimately, take a wild stab at who would win the race. Because you've got the who's who of the past handful of years. So with a combination of running styles, Beyer speed figures that were earned, Timeform US pace ratings, pace numbers that were earned. Keep in mind, these are only Breeders' Cup Classic winning performances. So some of these horses ran in multiple Breeders' Cup Classics. I'm only using the races in which they won as the sort of barometer. And also factoring in their running styles. Are any of them dependent on going? Are any of them totally void of early speed? That sort of thing. And I decided to go through and make my best guess, my best assessment of how a race with these horses would unfold. So I'm going to show you some replays. I'm going to show you a couple little spreadsheets I put together with maybe where they're positioned all around the track. And again, it's a little bit of a quieter time in the year. We got a moment to sit back and have some fun. Breeders' Cup is still fresh in our memory. The classic winner, the soon-to-be horse of the year, Knicks Go, is still fresh in our memory. Why not BS a little bit and see what we can come up with this? So that's what this first opening part of the show will be about, and we'll wrap things up with some 538 NFL forecasts for Week 11. But let's start with what I've had a good time doing it. I hope those of you watching and listening will have a good time as well. And those of you that aren't on YouTube, maybe you want to head on over there. Going to have some replays, different portions of different races, and a couple of other visual aids. So let's just call it the Fantasy Breeders' Cup Classic. The past 11 winners, if they all lined up at Churchill Downs going 1.25 miles, how would it play out and who would win? I don't know. Here's a guess, though. So what you're looking at right here are the 11 most recent winners of the Breeders' Cup Classic in the order of most recent year. So let's say reverse chronological order, with 2021 with Knicks Go, all the way down to 2011 with Drosselmeyer. This column, column B, is a morning line that I whipped up, that I threw together for the 11 runners. Your favorite, or the favorite that I made, was the 2015 winner, American Pharoah, at odds of 2-1. The co-second choices, Gunrunner in 2017, Arrogate in 2016, at odds of 3-1. And then you have a massive jump to Authentic at 10-1, Knicks Go at 12-1, Mucho Macho Man and Fort Larned at 15-1, Vino Rosso at 20-1, and then Accelerate, Bayern, and Drosselmeyer at 30-1. That adds up to roughly 123 points, keeping in mind that we're not making a fair odds line. We are making a morning line, and you factor in the takeout with those sort of things. This column is the horse themselves, the names. Then you have Timeform US pace ratings for each of these horses in their classic victories, half, 3/4, 1 mile, 1.25 miles. And then you have the Beyer speed figure earned in each of these victories. So this is the template. This is sort of it's not the end all be all. It's not how I didn't go, bit by bit saying this horse earned this, they were ahead of this other horse. Yeah, I got a little bit more sort of subjective using this as the framework for it, but some horses knowing that they're better off when they're on the lead. Others have shown versatility, things like that. So from there, it was, all right, they break from the gates. And you can see here, this is, if I can finagle this is going to be the start of 3 different races. 1, 2, and 3. They're all going to break from the gates. These are the Breeders' Cup Classics. All of these from NBC Sports. You can see this race up here. Top left corner, you've got Authentic going to the front. Down here, you've got Bayern, who just cleaned out half the field. He's making his way to the front. And over here on the right-hand side, you've got Knicks Go as they're coming down the straightaway, entering the clubhouse turn for the first of 2 turns, going 1.25 miles. Now, they're all moving relatively comfortably, but keep in mind, as we pause them all, these are all horses that like to realistically be on the lead dictating things. Bayern was more or less a need the lead type. Knicks Go was more or less a need the lead type, and Authentic was as well. So that makes me think, all right, let's try to design this race a little bit. Where are certain horses going to be positioned? And that's what brings us to this screen, the opening quarter mile. You can see it down at the bottom. And I know it's not the largest piece, but you'll understand why more momentarily. I have Knicks Go, Authentic, and Bayern out there on the lead. Just in behind them, the likes of Gunrunner, American Pharoah, Arrogate, and Fort Larned. Slightly farther behind them, you've got Accelerate and Mucho Macho Man. Vino Rosso, second last. Drosselmeyer, well out the back of the pack. I think that's pretty reasonable as to how you could anticipate an opening quarter mile of a 1.25 mile Breeders' Cup Classic going with these horses involved. Now, you could certainly argue that Gunrunner and American Pharoah, at the very least, if not adding in Fort Larned, are as fast, if not faster, than the three horses that are out there on the lead in Knicks Go, Authentic, and Bayern. But Gunrunner and American Pharoah both showed a willingness or an ability to sit off of a target and pounce. Therefore, I don't know that it would have done them any good, despite the fact that Gunrunner's pace figs early on in his Breeders' Cup Classic win in 2017 were much faster than anything that these top three had ever run, or at least ran in their Breeders' Cup Classic. I think they would have been content, Florent Geroux, Steve Asmussen, to sit off of these targets and say, look, we just think we're a better horse. Same with American Pharoah, with Victor Espinoza and Bob Baffert. As good as Authentic is, and as good as Bayern is, and Knicks Go as well, I think, the Gunrunners and American Pharoahs of the world, I don't think they were terribly concerned. But who knows? Arrogate, he's positioned there. In all reality, he could have probably been in either this flight or just slightly behind in this area back here with Mucho Macho Man and Accelerate. But he did have a decent enough early gear. Maybe he wasn't quite as fast as these two naturally, or even a Fort Larned, who gets a little lost in the shuffle because it feels like it was a million years ago. But I think that was the thing about Arrogate, the ability to, he may have to get worked on a little bit more to be up there with them, but he could do that if absolutely dependent on it. And Fort Larned was one of those horses that I think time and the horses that followed him have done him a disservice, because he was an extremely talented racehorse. You can say the same thing about Mucho Macho Man. I think Fort Larned personally was better than Mucho Macho Man at their best. But again, when you all of a sudden following them, you've got American Pharoah and Arrogate and Gunrunner and Authentic and Knicks Go. It's easy to all of a sudden forget about how talented and how good those racehorses were. Now, we've gone through the opening quarter mile. We pick up the pace figs. These are the horses and what they earned through the opening half of their Breeders' Cup Classic wins. And you'll note that Gunrunner and American Pharoah are 1 and 3 as far as the pace figs are concerned. Accelerate, oddly enough, at a very, very fast opening half in the race that he won. Now, why do I personally not believe they would be positioned this way? Because if they're all running to win the race, Bayern had to go, Knicks Go's got to go, and Authentic's got to go. So I'm assuming they're going much quicker than these pace ratings that they achieved in their Breeders' Cup Classic victories would end up being. I think they had to go faster if they were going to try to win a race like this, or would try to win a race like this. That leaves Gunrunner and American Pharoah sitting in, let's say, kind of the catbird seat, where they're both horses that are fast enough to go to the front, but they're also versatile enough to sit off of a target and be effective. And you can see here the way that I've sort of laid things out. Knicks Go and Authentic from the post positions. And by the way that I went through and assigned posts was just purely based on the year that they ran. So Knicks Go was the most recent one. He broke from post 1, Authentic in 2020, post 2, and so on. So you see those two out there. I think Bayern, unfortunately, gets a little bit compromised because he's breaking from post 8. He's going to be carrying some ground. And now Gunrunner and American Pharoah breaking from posts 5 and 7. They're in a position to start taking advantage. This is Pharoah's 2015 Breeders' Cup Classic from the Breeders' Cups YouTube channel. And here is the 2017 Classic from the NBC Sports channel with Gunrunner. And again, they're on the lead, both of them, as they're going through this second quarter mile in this 1.25 mile affair. But they had both shown throughout their campaigns that they were more than capable of rating and still being just as effective as when they were out there cutting out the fractions. So now they're going to spin onto the backside in behind those couple runners that we already talked about. The horses who I think are predominantly absolutely need the lead types. And that puts these two horses at a great advantage when they go through their opening half mile. which again, based on my estimation, would look something like this. Knicks Go and Authentic are still out there. Bayern, because of the ground loss, now is probably in a position where maybe he's a half length behind to 3/4 of a length behind the top two, but Gunrunner and Pharoah are both now right on the heels of Knicks Go and Authentic. That puts Bayern in a really bad position, especially since, again, I think he was a need the lead type, and he didn't get the lead here, so you can kind of see where I think this thing is going for him. Arrogate and Fort Larned now are tucked in just behind. I think this is one of those instances where going down the front side, if you're Fort Larned and Brian Hernandez Jr., rather than being hung in the 5-6 path going around the first turn, let's take back a little bit. Let's pull him back in behind. Maybe we can follow these two big runners in Gunrunner and American Pharoah. We've boxed in Arrogate a bit. We've got the jump on Mucho Macho Man and Accelerate in Fort Larned, and Vino Rosso and Drosselmeyer. Still in a pretty good position, especially if you think the pace could end up coming back a little bit. And we know that the distance is going to be the thing that gets a horse like Fort Larned defeated. That's my guess through the opening half of where a race like this would be playing out, where these horses would be positioned through the opening half. Once we go through the opening 3/4, things start to pick up a little bit. Opening half mile is out of the way. You've got Gunrunner starting to lurk, starting to make his move a bit. Knicks Go is still the one that's cutting out the fractions, though. Keep an eye on Fort Larned, though. This, to me, is one of the big moves in recent memory. Over the past 10 years in a Breeders' Cup Classic, you're going to see bottom left is Knicks Go, far right is Gunrunner, upper left is going to be Fort Larned. And they all are running along now. Fort Larned starts to separate from the rest of his field that he ran against. It's a brilliant move. Brian Hernandez Jr. wins the race here. They're going to try to replicate that move against Gunrunner and against Knicks Go. And you see Knicks Go does something relatively similar. He starts to put lengths on the rest of the field. That's really when you're starting to see some separation against the fields that they ran against. It's one thing to do that against, I don't want to call them also rans because every horse running in a Breeders' Cup Classic deserves to be there. It's another thing to do it against the winners of all of these races. So Fort Larned is starting to make up some ground. Knicks Go's trying to get away and put lengths on the field as he did in this year's Breeders' Cup just a couple weeks ago. The problem is he's trying to do that against Gunrunner, and against Fort Larned, and against American Pharoah and some of these other runners. So through 3/4, I think Knicks Go's still out there. I think Gunrunner has tipped out and he's put himself in prime position. He's breathing down, almost eyeballing Knicks Go. American Pharoah is just in behind, probably in that 2-3 path between the two. Fort Larned started to make that move more from mid-pack. Now he's kind of drafting in behind Gunrunner. Yeah, he's going to carry a little bit of ground, but in the grand scheme of things, if you can have Gunrunner tow you into the run, why not do so? I think this is when you start to see Bayern and Authentic crack. And truth be told, Bayern in all reality would be the one that would be out here. Authentic maybe is out in this direction. But point being, they're both starting to back up. I think the pressure early on from Knicks Go, and now with the other pieces being turned up from Gunrunner, being turned up from American Pharoah and Fort Larned, I think they take their toll on Authentic and Bayern. They start to drop anchor. Meanwhile, Arrogate is still just biding his time. He is not losing touch with the front runners, but we know Arrogate's best trait was his bottom. The fact that he could run 15 miles and it felt like he got stronger as the run got longer. Don't count out Vino Rosso and Accelerate, though, and even Mucho Macho Man for that matter. Mucho Macho Man and Fort Larned, I'm sure you could look at it and say there really isn't a great deal separating the two. To me, there was more tactical speed with Fort Larned, more quality early speed. Mucho Macho Man was able to procure those sort of positions when the paces were a little bit on the more moderate side, not from a fractional standpoint, but from a pace rating kind of perspective. So these three right here, just because they're going to be a handful of lengths off the front runners, I don't think that means that they're out of it by any stretch. The only horse who really hasn't gotten a shout yet is Drosselmeyer, and for good reason. He is just not nearly fast enough to keep up with these horses throughout the early portions of the run. That's why he was a bomb when he won the race. And guess what? He defeated a less than stellar field when he won. So no surprise that through the opening 3/4 of the race, he is dead last, and he'll probably be dead last for a little while still to come. Now the real running begins. We've gotten through 3/4 of a mile. Knicks Go has been confronted by Gunrunner, and my feeling hasn't changed. I didn't learn anything from Knicks Go winning the Breeders' Cup Classic just a couple weeks ago. We know when he's allowed to just get out there and wing it on the front, he's wickedly, wickedly fast. But if he gets looked in the eye, I still don't think he's going to go on with it. When Gunrunner comes up and looks you in the eye, I think it's over. I think Knicks Go drops anchor. But now the problem for Gunrunner is He's got American Pharoah breathing down his neck. And then the big boy, Arrogate, is starting to get the engine warmed up. So here they go. They're running around the far turn. Arrogate's starting to get pumped on. He's got a long way to go to catch up to the likes of Gunrunner and American Pharoah. And we know that at their best, they might not stop. They may just run away and hide from everyone. This is going to bring us to the top of the lane at this point. Pharoah's trying to kick on and run down Gunrunner. Here comes Arrogate. Gunrunner is on the lead, though, as the field turns for home. And I think that's going to be the part that is most important to factor in when you take a look at this. Top of the lane, Gunrunner on the front. American Pharoah is running after him. Fort Larned is trying to keep up with American Pharoah. And Arrogate, while he's still a few lengths back, we know that his best foot is going forward now. We know that that stretch run, every inch of that is going to work to his advantage. Is that going to be the same case for everyone? Yes, they all wanted 1.25 miles, but which one of them truly wanted it more? And does he have enough time? That's equally as important, because yes, maybe these other horses are going to start to slow down a little bit, but is it going to be enough for him to make up that ground, not only make it up, but pass them? You see Knicks Go. I have him starting to back up pretty badly at this point, because again, I think when confronted, I think that's what would happen, especially against runners of this caliber. No disrespect, I think he's a really good horse, but I think this is really when the rubber meets the road. This is when the horses really start to run, the cream of the crop. Vino Rosso starting to get involved. Accelerate, he was in a difficult position, because if you really went up there and ran with the speeds, which again, from a pace rating standpoint, it's not out of the realm of possibility that he could have done so. As you can see with the way that he had run in his classic, 139, 137, 134, that puts him among the leaders. The problem is you see how much he slowed down against a much weaker field in that 2018 classic. Against a field like this, I think if they had run, or he would have been run like this, I think he would have ended up with Knicks Go starting to back up in a bad way. So I think tactically, decision, you take him back a little bit as opposed to trying to run early on with everyone else. The question becomes, again, Gunrunner is now on the lead. Can American Pharoah run him down? And if it's not American Pharoah, can a horse like Arrogate go and run him down? Look at the way that these horses finish from the top of the lane to the finish in their classic victories. Gunrunner from a 146 to a 138. Pharoah picked it up a little bit from 134 to 136. The big one, you see Arrogate going from 131 to 141. He actually got faster, and that was him in a nutshell. Faster and stronger as the races got longer. The stretch run of the Fantasy Breeders' Cup Classic. Top of the stretch, Gunrunner's on the lead. You've got American Pharoah breathing down his neck. You've got Arrogate warming up. They're all going to go for home at the same time. The problem is, no disrespect to California Chrome, no disrespect to American Pharoah, no disrespect to Arrogate. When a horse like Gunrunner has the lead, at his best, he's going to be really hard to run down. And I think in all likelihood, you'd be looking at a scenario in which, and we'll let Pharoah run through the wire. I feel like Pharoah's going to go after Gunrunner. He's not going to be able to get by. Arrogate's going to come with this exact same run that he does against California Chrome. The difference is, and as good as Chrome was, don't get me wrong, this is not meant to be a slight against California Chrome, but Gunrunner was just a better horse, flat out. So this piece right here, I feel like Chrome effectively plays the role of Pharoah, or Pharoah plays Chrome's role. I know he wasn't actually the one that got run down, but I think he finishes probably a half length behind Arrogate, who then finishes probably about a half length behind Gunrunner, because Gunrunner, with that advantage from a tactical standpoint, is able to hold on and get the job done. I think Gunrunner would win this race. I think Arrogate would finish second, American Pharoah third. The three of them separated by probably a length and a quarter, all told. Fort Larned, maybe a length or two behind the top three. I think he runs a really good race. Vino Rosso takes advantage of the way that everything plays out, where some of these other speeds, they try to win the race. Not that Vino Rosso doesn't, but I don't think, even with the pace figs that he had earned in his classic, I think there's just a world difference as far as the talent level is concerned, running forward against inferior types as opposed to running forward against these kind of horses. I think he does well to finish fifth. Mucho Macho Man comes along. He and Vino Rosso run very similar races. I think Vino Rosso on his best day may have been slightly better, but that's debatable. Accelerate does what he does. He's just not quite good enough to run with these types. And then you really see what the pace situation looked like. Knicks Go falters, Authentic falters, Bayern falters, and Drosselmeyer, even with probably an advantageous running style in a race like this, He's just not fast enough. We kind of knew that going into it, that his best was not nearly good enough to run with these. So to me, this would be the final order of finish. In my opinion, Gun Runner would win this race. And I know I've said it a million times before that Arrogate's best, I still think is the best I've ever seen. And I stand by that. I'm talking about these were their Breeders' Cup Classic winning performances, and we're basing it off of this. If you want to add in another race, Arrogate's Dubai World Cup is the best race I've ever seen, but that's not what this exercise is all about, or this little fun talking point. Purely based on their winning efforts in their Breeders' Cup Classics, I think Gun Runner wins. I think Arrogate finishes second. American Pharoah rounds out your top three. If you're playing a superfecta, Fort Larned gets a piece of this thing. And if you're playing a super high five, Vino Rosso finishing fifth. Let me know your thoughts. Again, maybe this is something that everybody looks at and goes, what a waste of 20 minutes of my time or 25 minutes of my time. I thought it would be fun. And to bring it back to the initial point, to kind of contextualize where Knicks Go ranks in the midst of these runners, I don't think the 8th place finish, in my opinion, means that he's necessarily the 8th best of these winners. I think the dynamics of a theoretical race with these horses would lead him to finish back here. But I think he's probably middle of the pack. And to bring it back to the figs, from the final number, and granted, this is not the pace-adjusted number. This is the final number that these horses earned in their Breeders' Cup Classic runs. You can see that Knicks Go is 6th with his 133. He's tied for 5th with Vino Rosso, behind Fort Larned, behind American Pharoah, Gun Runner, and Arrogate. From a buyer standpoint, the fastest ones were Arrogate and American Pharoah, followed by Gun Runner and Fort Larned. And just in behind Bayern, who was 5th, was Knicks Go. Now, I will also, I think I've said it before, but I firmly believe this. I don't believe the 120 that American Pharoah earned. I think that was more of a, trying to think of the right way of putting it without sounding, controversial. I think it was a respect thing that the Triple Crown winner had to earn a 120, put him in that rarefied air. I think when you look and see the way that race came back, the horses that ran in that year's classic that then returned, they all regressed almost across the board. And truth be told, depending on how you want to look at it, if we use that sort of 20-point number as a differential between the two, many of these do line up, and this one comes up a little bit light. The difference between the Timeform US number and a buyer speed figure. I think Pharoah's classic was probably closer to a 115 or a 116. That's neither here nor there. The point being, talking about Knicks Go, I think he's probably right in the middle of these past 10 as far as classic winners are concerned. I think he was better than Bayern. I think he was better than Mucho Macho Man. I think he was better than Accelerate. I think he was better than Drosselmeyer. He's probably comparable, in my opinion, to Authentic. I think they're probably the two more, I think they're the two most comparable as far as running style is concerned and overall talent level is concerned. I think he's probably behind these four: Arrogate, American Pharoah, Gun Runner, and Fort Larned, not in that order. Just my opinion. Let me know what your thoughts are about all of these horses, about this silly theoretical fantasy Breeders' Cup Classic that I wanted to throw together, to entertain myself, and then also hopefully entertain some of you out there watching and listening. Let me know what your thoughts are about all these beneath the video player on YouTube or on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. I figured just a bit of a fun exercise. And again, maybe it was a waste of time, but let me know what your thoughts are about that little Fantasy Breeders' Cup Classic that we threw together there just now. Let's wrap up this week's show relatively quickly with NFL Week 11 forecasts over on 538. I tell you what, these past 2 weeks have been a bloodbath for me. And I think it's a good example of what happens, tying it into horse racing from a betting standpoint, tying it into sports betting. If you're really aggressive with your numbers, and I think of horse racing, when people assign probabilities, they say this horse wins the race X amount of times. If you go overboard, you'd better be right. Otherwise, the ramifications are significant. And that's what's happened to me, unfortunately, this past 2 weeks with the NFL forecast. When I go through and run the numbers in my model, look, I go with the model. I'm not trying to get cute and sit here and go eye test this, that, and the other. What it tells me, I believe it. Because the overall track record has been accurate. You just get those random pieces, and I think that's, I hope if nothing else, what I've tried to instill for many, many weeks and months now is that random stuff happens. No matter how strong your convictions are, it doesn't mean you're going to be right. And I remember, not to just, cherry pick things, but I remember one person sending me a tweet before the Classic saying, I have never been as sure of anything in my life that Hot Rod Charlie was going to win. And where did he finish? 4th? Now, in a vacuum, you were incorrect. But if they run the race 100 times, maybe he does win a handful of them, 20 of them, 15 of them, however many. Same goes for these forecasts and predictions. So when I throw out a 90% probability that that's what I'm assigning, that's what I believe, but there's still meaning there's that 10% of the time, 10 out of 100 games that they play, that it doesn't happen. And I'm going to get whacked. I'm going to get absolutely smashed as far as losing points is concerned. And that's what's happened to me in the past 2 weeks. I have been wrong a fair amount. The problem is the games that I have been wrong on have been the ones that I have basically maxed out on my probability scale. And it's just destroyed my overall season as far as the points are concerned. The number's still pretty good. It's in that 65, 66% range. But when you lose so many points on some of the strongest convictions, that's when you end up going in a tailspin. That's where I'm at right now. All my gains have basically been washed away. So hopefully we can get back on track. And I've got some high probability games, and I need to be right on them if I want to try to claw my way back into sort of that top 15%. Because right now, I washed away everything. I've lost like 300 points the past 2 weeks, and it's not because I've lost a ton. Granted, I've probably gone 50-50 the past 2 weeks. It's been very difficult to come up with some of these outcomes, but it's how heavily I've weighted some of the losses that has really just sunk me. So let's start it off Thursday night. New England Patriots at the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons are 6-point home dogs. I have the Patriots winning 31-14. That's a 90% probability. The Indianapolis Colts at the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are 7-point home favorites. I have Buffalo winning 32-19. That's a 90% probability. Washington Football Team at the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers are 3.5-point home favorites. I have them winning 22-14 over the Washington Football Team. That's a 73% probability. Baltimore Ravens at the Chicago Bears. The Bears are 6-point home underdogs. I have the Ravens winning 25-14. That's an 85% probability. Detroit Lions at the Cleveland Browns. The Browns are 10-point home favorites. I have them winning 24-13. That's an 83% probability. San Francisco 49ers at the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jags are 6-point home dogs. I have the 49ers winning this game 19-16. That's a 60% probability. Green Bay Packers at the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings are 2.5-point home dogs. I have them losing. I have Green Bay going to Minnesota and winning 24-21. There's a 57% probability. Miami Dolphins at the New York Jets. The Jets are 3-point home dogs. I have the Dolphins winning 20-14. There's a 70% probability. Houston Texans at the Tennessee Titans. The Titans are 10-point home favorites. I have them winning 30-13 over the Texans, 90% probability. New Orleans Saints at the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles are 1.5-point home favorites. I have them losing. I have the Saints going in and winning 26-21. That is a 63% probability. Cincinnati Bengals at the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders are 1-point home dogs. I have the Bengals winning 22-20. That's a 56% probability. The Dallas Cowboys at the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs at home -2.5. This would be a game that I would be betting just flat out. I'd be betting money line. I have Dallas winning 31-23 in Kansas City. I think a lot of people all of a sudden, based on last night's victory, and I'm saying last night, I'm recording this on Monday, because Kansas City went in there and put the boots to Vegas. Keep in mind, that game was nip and tuck until that whole Deshaun Jackson issue in the third quarter. I think that's going a little aggressive. We've seen this Chiefs team. They're not very good. I think Dallas is very good. I have Dallas winning 31-23. That is a 74% probability. The Arizona Cardinals, and I'm assuming we don't have Murray or Hopkins, knowing that we're going into a bye week. I believe their next game is a bye, or their next week is a bye. Arizona going into Seattle. Seattle is a 3-point home dog. I still have Arizona winning 27-22. That's a 67% probability. Pittsburgh Steelers at the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are 4.5-point home favorites. I have them winning 20-17 over Pittsburgh. That's a 59% probability. And then Monday night, the New York Giants at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs are 10.5-point home favorites. I have them winning 31-19 at home over the Giants. It's an 86% probability. There you have it. NFL Week 11 forecasts over on FiveThirtyEight.com. If you have any thoughts on those games, if you have any thoughts on modeling in general, if you have any thoughts on the Fantasy Breeders' Cup Classic, or anything else that you may want me to touch on for next week's show, leave your comment beneath the video player on YouTube or on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. However you take this thing in, it means a great deal to myself and everybody over at In the Money Media. Please rate, review, and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, make sure that bell icon's lit up so you get notified anytime new content is uploaded to the In the Money Media channel. And again, as far as sort of podcast subscriptions are concerned, leave us a review. It's one of those things that it may not seem like it's a big deal, and it can be 4 words. I hate this show, or I love this show. But point being, any review helps us. It just does. Without getting into all the details, you understand. I'm sure you're all smart people. You can figure out why. Please, 5 stars, 1 star, whatever it may be, just ratings, reviews, the whole 9. Please leave those if you listen on a podcast app, or again, if you're over on YouTube, just make sure you subscribe and give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down, whatever your prerogative. Until next week, best of luck however you play, wherever you play, and whatever you play. Did I screw that up? Best of luck however you play, whatever you play, and wherever you play. Hey, tell me. It's been a long day. Good luck. That's the easiest way to go about saying it. This has been episode 91 of the Matt Bernier Show. We will talk to you again next week.